They dared the humble janitor to play the company piano as a joke. What he played brought the room to silence and made the CEO quietly leave in tears. "Gentle," Elliot said under his breath, his voice soft and worn. "This one's got a memory." He wasn't speaking to anyone, really, just to himself. And maybe to the piano. An aging Baldwin grand tucked into the corner of the Cordale Tower lobby, like it had been put there to die quietly. Elliot Moore, 46, janitor, widower, and part-time ghost in the building where ambition hummed louder than conversation, moved slowly along the piano's edge, cloth in hand. He wiped with care, not out of duty but out of reverence. To most, the piano was a relic, a piece of expensive furniture left over from the building's former life as a theater. Now, it sat under a skylight surrounded by glass and concrete, a forgotten artifact in a place built to forget. He ran a thumb along the curve of the lid. The surface was chipped in places, the brass pedal worn dull. But under the dust, something still lived there, something waiting. "You always touch that thing like it's gonna tell you a secret," came a voice from behind him. Elliot turned slightly. It was Nora, security desk, night shift. Tall, always in a hoodie, sharp with her jokes and sharp with her silences. "Maybe it already did," Elliot said. She squinted at him. "Creepy, but poetic. A beat past. You gonna play it someday?" "Nope. Why not?" "Because some things aren't meant to come back." At 6:52 p.m., the building started to fill with expensive shoes and names on tags. Cordale's annual winter gala was being held upstairs on the 42nd floor. The sort of event where speeches were written 3 times and still didn't say anything. Where people clapped before the music started, just to seem ahead of the curve. Elliot was cleaning smudges off the lobby glass doors when his daughter arrived. Ava, 11, quiet, bright, and dressed in a faded hoodie too big for her frame. She carried her sketchbook like it was armor. "You're early," he said, smiling. She shrugged. "Thought I'd draw." "You hungry?" She shook her head, already flipping through pages. He never asked too many questions when she got like that. When Ava was quiet, it usually meant she was seeing more than she could say. "Can I sit near the piano?" she asked. "You know the deal, just stay out of the way." She nodded, then walked across the polished floor and settled beside the Baldwin like it was an old friend. Elliot watched her go. The way she moved was too careful for her age. He always wondered what she remembered, what she knew without being told. At 7:19 p.m., the first insult came disguised as a joke. "Oh man, you're still babying that thing," said Trevor Miles, director of branding and full-time smirk enthusiast. He strolled into the lobby with his phone in one hand and a wine glass in the other. "I swear you're polishing it like it's your prom date." Elliot didn't respond, just kept wiping. Trevor circled the piano like it was prey. He sipped, he squinted. "Hey," he said suddenly. "You ever actually play?" Elliot paused, cloth in midair. "Used to," he said. "Used to." Trevor grinned. "Oh, that's gold." He turned toward a small group of interns trailing behind him. "Get this," he said, like he was telling a story at a bar. "Our guy here used to play. Like, for real." A few amused laughs. Phones came out reflexively. Trevor leaned on the edge of the piano. "Come on, give us a taste. Just a few notes. I mean, we're all stuck here waiting for the elevators, right? Might as well get a show." Elliot folded the cloth in his hand slowly, carefully. His movements had a stillness to them, the kind that made people uncomfortable if they were too used to noise. "Not tonight," he said, voice steady. Trevor smirked. "Nervous? Lost your magic?" "It's not magic," Elliot said. "Whatever it is, I bet you don't have it anymore." A soft rustle from the corner. Ava had stopped sketching. Her eyes were locked on her father now. Vanessa Hale, CEO of Cordale, arrived exactly at 7:30 p.m. She entered the lobby like someone entering a chessboard, calculated, poised, unreadable. Her dress was a shade of midnight that almost swallowed light, her eyes sharper than the building's glass. She didn't stop at the elevator. She turned when she saw Elliot. She noticed the piano, noticed the tension. "Something wrong?" she asked, voice like velvet with thorns. Trevor straightened, his bravado flickering. No, no, just asking if our janitor here might give us a little performance. Vanessa looked at Elliot. Their eyes met, just for a second, then she looked away. Don't mock things you don't understand, Trevor, she said, already walking past. Elliot turned back to his cart, but the moment was planted, and it would grow. That night upstairs, the music was perfectly forgettable. A string quartet played Vivaldi like a Spotify playlist. Applause was pre-timed. Speeches came with polished anecdotes. Wine flowed like water. Everyone laughed half a second after they were supposed to. But in the far corner, Vanessa stood alone near the window, staring down 42 stories to the lobby floor, to the piano, to the man who never stopped moving, never asked for attention, and somehow played silence like an instrument. Back downstairs, Elliot stood behind the service hallway, waiting for Ava to finish her sketch. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "They were laughing at you." "I've been laughed at before." She looked up at him. "Do you still hear music in your head?" He hesitated. "Sometimes," he said. "But I don't let it out." "Why?" "Because it's easier not to." Ava looked down. Her hands tightened around her pencil. "Mom would have wanted you to play." Elliot closed his eyes. "Just for a second, I know." At 8:24 p.m., the elevator dinged. Trevor came down again, more flushed, more emboldened. He walked straight up to the piano, and loudly to the room. "All right, folks, it's been decided." He clapped his hands once. "Our humble janitor has agreed to play us a little something." He hadn't, but the crowd that had begun to gather near the lobby bar didn't care. Even Nora looked up from her station. Ava sat up straighter. Vanessa, back near the hallway, leaned just slightly forward. Elliot stood motionless, then walked toward the piano. Elliot walked toward the piano like it wasn't just an instrument, but something heavier. Something he had carried for years, in silence. The crowd in the lobby wasn't large, 15, maybe 20 people, but they watched him now like he was an exhibit. Someone had pulled out their phone. Nora looked like she wanted to throw it in a trash can. Trevor stepped aside, smug, arms crossed. "Let's see what you got, maestro." Elliot didn't answer. He simply sat, adjusted the bench, ran his hands along the edge of the keys. Ava watched from the shadows, her sketchbook now held tight to her chest, as if afraid to open it. Elliot didn't start right away. He let his hands hover. And then he played. The first notes were barely audible, a quiet thread of sound, careful, unsure, like something emerging from a long winter. He didn't play for them. He didn't even play for Ava. He played for a woman whose voice he hadn't heard in years, but whose memory still lived in every chord he could never bring himself to play out loud. Rachel. The song wasn't written, not really. It was memory, regret, the lullaby that never got finished. The piece he started writing when she was in labor. The one he stopped composing the day she didn't come home. His hands moved like they were remembering muscle by muscle. Trevor, who expected a mess of plunked keys and beginner notes, slowly dropped his arms. The interns near the coffee bar stopped giggling. Even Nora stood up. Ava leaned forward, her eyes wide, and Vanessa, watching from the far edge of the lobby, moved closer, quietly, like someone approaching a sleeping animal. The piece wasn't perfect. That wasn't the point. It was raw, heavy, and entirely unpolished. But somewhere in the middle, something shifted. The melody dipped into a minor chord that didn't resolve. A pause, longer than expected, not dramatic, just honest. That's when Vanessa covered her mouth. She knew that chord. Not the notes, but the feeling. It was the sound of almost. The sound of something that might have been. When Elliot finished, there was no applause, just stillness. The kind that holds its breath after something holy walks through a room. He stood slowly, said nothing, and walked back toward Ava. Trevor took a step forward like he was about to say something clever, but no words came. Vanessa stepped between them. "Don't," she said quietly, without looking at him. Later, in the hallway behind the lobby, Ava clung to Elliot's arm. "That was hers," she whispered. He nodded. "I never heard it. You weren't supposed to. But you finished it," she said. "I didn't," he said, "but I stopped hiding it." Vanessa found them still standing there 10 minutes later. Elliot, she said. He turned. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes weren't cold anymore. Come with me, she said. She led him up to the 42nd floor, now mostly empty. The last of the guests were leaving. He followed her into a private lounge behind the gala hall. It was quiet there. Dark wood, a single window, a bottle of untouched wine. She sat, crossed one leg over the other, and looked at him. I used to play, she said finally. Elliot didn't respond. I was 5 when my parents bought the piano, 6 when I started competitions, 9 when I stopped playing for fun, 16 when I quit. She looked at her hands, perfectly manicured, still. My mother called it a waste. She didn't understand quitting, so I called it a pivot. Elliot watched her, silent. I haven't touched a key in 20 years, she said. But when you played tonight, her voice caught. She didn't finish the sentence. Elliot looked down. It wasn't supposed to come out. But it did, she said. And that matters. A knock at the door. Ava peeked in, sketchbook in hand. Vanessa smiled gently. Come in. Ava entered and held out a torn sheet of paper, her drawing from earlier. It showed Elliot at the piano, light falling on his shoulders. The crowd behind him blurred. One note floating up from the keys like a bird mid-flight. Vanessa looked at it for a long time. She sees you, she said to Elliot. She always has, he replied. A week passed, no announcements, no press, but the piano was moved, not out of the lobby, into the old recital room on the 15th floor, unused since the company absorbed a failing arts nonprofit 3 years ago. Vanessa had the room cleaned, quietly, without asking anyone. Then she left a key in an envelope taped to Elliot's locker. No note, just the key. The first time Elliot opened that door, he didn't go inside. He stood in the doorway and looked at the piano like it might disappear if he blinked. The second time he brought Ava. She sat on the bench. Her feet didn't touch the floor. Can I play something sad? She asked. He nodded. But the kind that gets better at the end, she added. He smiled. And together they made up a song. Word spread, not officially. But it spread, about the janitor who could play, about the CEO who was there when it happened, about the room that used to be locked but wasn't anymore. A marketing intern started coming during her lunch break, just to listen. A building technician brought his teenage son one afternoon and cried through 2 songs. Even Trevor came by once, didn't say anything, just leaned against the back wall and left before the last note. Vanessa visited too. Once, late, she stood at the door. Elliot saw her and stopped playing. You don't have to leave, he said. She hesitated, then stepped inside. Do you still remember the first piece you ever played? She asked. Not really. I do, she said. It was Claire de Lune. I ruined it. Played it like I was being graded. Elliot smiled. Play it again. I'd need both hands. You still have them. The duet was clumsy, uneven, but the room didn't care. It wasn't about perfection. It was about presence and healing and noise that meant something again. Ava drew the 2 of them later, her dad and the CEO side by side at the piano. She titled the sketch, Second Chances Have Keys. Epilogue, 6 months later, the listening room, as Ava called it, was now open twice a week. No formal concerts, just music, sometimes from Elliot, sometimes from employees who hadn't touched a piano in decades, sometimes from Ava, still figuring out where to put her hands but never afraid of sound. Vanessa sponsored a program quietly. No PR, no splashy website, just a quiet foundation for real music. For people who thought their art had expired. One evening, Elliot sat alone at the piano after Ava had gone home. Vanessa entered, barefoot again. Do you believe in redemption? She asked. He didn't answer right away. I believe in remembering, he said finally. That's where it starts. She looked at him. What happens after? He smiled. You play.